For this step, you need pliers, 3, 2.5, 2mm Allen keys. Four aluminium extrusions, frame, and M5X16R screws should be prepared for this step. Place the longer extrusions next to the frame. Make sure that the Prusa logo is visible. Screw extrusions to the inner part of the frame. Place short extrusions on the other side and screw them on the outer part of the frame. Make sure that the longer extrusions are on the side of Prusa logo and shorter ones are on the other side on the further holes. For this step you need front plate, rear plate, M5X16R screws and the PSU holders. Rotate the frame with the long extrusions towards you. Place front plate on the extrusions and screw it on. Do not tighten it yet. When the plate is on the extrusions, tighten the screws diagonally. For PSU holder installation, you should refer to the guidebook provided by Prusa, since there is 3 types of PSU available. Now rotate the frame so the short extrusions are towards you, and screw the rear plate on. Tighten the screws diagonally. After installation of the front and the rear plate, geometry should be checked for warping. Place the frame on the flat surface and check that everything is aligned. If imperfections are found, loosen the screws and press the extrusions against the flat surface and tighten the screws again. For the installation of the anti-vibration feet, turn the frame on its side and insert the feet and turn it 90 degrees to secure it on its place. For following steps, please prepare wire rod holders, M3 extend screws, M3NS nuts. Take one wire rod holder and insert two M3NS nuts. Make sure you have pressed the nuts all the way in. You can use pliers, but be careful, you can damage the printed part. Take the first pair of the wire rod holders and place them on the longer extrusions. Opening 4 screws must be facing up. Rotate the 3D printed parts towards the front plate. Secure each front holder with 2 M3 extend screws. Tighten both screws equally but not completely. We will tighten them fully later on. Take the second pair of the wire rod holders and secure them on with M3 extend screws on the rear plate, which show the extrusions. Tighten the both screws equally, but not completely. We will tighten them fully later. For the following steps, please prepare Y-belt idler, M3 X18 screw, M3 extend screw, M3NN nylock nut, M3N, and 6238 bearing housing. Take the Y-belt idler and insert 2 M3N nuts from the top. Turn the idler to the other side and insert the M3NN nylock nut. The rubber inside the nut must be facing towards you. Be careful. Don't over-tighten the screw, you can break the part. Make sure all the 3 nuts are all the way in. Insert the prepared bearing in the Y-belt idler. Secure the bearing with the M3X18 screw. Don't fully tighten the screw. Place your finger on the bearing and ensure it can rotate freely. If needed, adjust the screw. Rotate the frame with long extrusions towards you. Take the Y-belt idler and place it on the front plate. Note there is a mark, circle, on the printed part facing up. Secure the Y-belt idler with 2 M3 extend screws. Tighten the screws until the printed part reaches the surface of the plate. For following steps, please prepare Y-axis motor, Y-motor holder, M3 extend screws, M3N nuts. Ensure that you are using the correct motor. Take the Y-motor holder and insert two M3N nuts. Place the Y motor holder on the motor. Ensure the correct orientation of the holder. Using two M3 extend screws, tighten holder and motor together. Take the Y motor holder and place it on the rear plate. Ensure the correct orientation. The motor shaft must be facing towards the aluminum extrusions with the PSU holders. Secure Y motor holder with M3 extend screws. For following steps, please prepare Y carriage, U-bolts, linear bearings, and M3NN nylock nuts. On this step, you should refer to the guidebook provided by Prusa to see the correct orientation of the bearings. Place the Y carriage on the flat surface. Orientation doesn't matter. Insert linear bearings in the cutouts and secure it by U-bolt. Hold thumb on the U-bolt and turn the carriage. Place new lock nuts on the both ends of the U-bolt. Start tightening the nuts, but ensure you are tightening both nuts equally. And as soon as the nut reaches the surface of the Y carriage, stop tightening. We will finish the tightening the nuts in the next step. Repeat these steps for remaining two linear bearings. Check if the bearings is centered in both directions. If not, slightly release the nuts and adjust the position. Then retighten the nuts to the previous state. When you are ready, using pliers, rotate each nut, but only 90 degrees. This is enough to fix the bearings without deforming it. Repeat these steps for remaining two linear bearings. Take all the smooth rods and compare their lengths. For Y carriage, you need mid-size rods. Now please be very careful. Gently insert the rod straight into the bearing. Do not apply too much force and do not tilt the rod. If you can't slide the smooth rods easily, check the two bearings are aligned properly. Take the Y carriage, including smooth rods, and place them in Y-jet frame. Make sure that two bearings are on the left side. Using your thumb, press the smooth rods inside all four holders. Do not use excessive force. Find the package with zip ties and take out 4 pieces. Slide the zip tie through the holder, there is a slot. Connect the zip tie and tighten it. The head should be inside the frame. Using pliers, cut the remaining part. Repeat this step in all 4 corners. Ensure all M3 extend screws on holders are slightly loosened, so the printed parts are able to move. Move the Y carriage back and forth across the entire length of the smooth rods to align them. Then move the carriage to the front plate and tighten all screws in the front Y holders. Move the Y carriage to the rear plate and tighten all screws in the back Y holders. There is a flat part on the motor shaft. Rotate it similarly to the first picture. See the direction of the arrows. Place a GT216 pulley on the Y motor shaft as shown in the picture. Don't press the pulley against the motor. Leave a gap so the pulley can rotate freely. One of the screws must be facing directly against the pad on the shaft. Slightly tighten the first screw. Turn the shaft and slightly tighten the second screw. For the following steps, please prepare Y belt holder, smaller of 2, Y belt tensioner, bigger of 2, Y-axis belt 650 mm, M3X30 screw, M3X10 screw, M3NN nylock nut, M3N nuts. Take the Y-belt holder, smaller of the 2 printed spots. Insert M3N nut all the way in. Insert M3NN nylock nut all the way in. Bend one end of the belt around M3X10 screw. Push it in the holder as in the picture. Use an Allen key to push the belt in. Make sure that the bent part and the end are with the width of the printed part. Teeth on the belt must be facing up. Tighten the screw until you reach the nut. Don't over tighten the screw, you will deform the belt. Hold the nut from the other side until the screw reaches its threads. Using M3 X10 screw, fix the Y-belt holder to the Y carriage. Tighten the screw and ensure the printed part is parallel with the axis between Y motor and Y belt idler. Use the hole on the left, see the picture. Guide the belt along the y-axis around the pulley on the y-motor and back. Make sure the belt is inside the frame, not under. Push the belt through the y-belt idler and back to the center of the y-carriage. Take the Y-belt tensioner, bigger of the two printed parts. Insert M3N nut all the way in. Bend the second end of the belt around the screw and push it in the holder as in the picture. Use an Allen key to push the belt in. Make sure the bent part and the end are within the width of the printed part. Teeth on the belt must be facing up. Tighten the screw until you reach the nut. Don't over-tighten the screw, you will deform the belt. Hold the nut from the other side until the screw reaches its threads. Insert the M3X30 screw through both printed parts. Start tightening until you reach the M3NN nylock nut. Make sure that the belt is placed in the axis of the printer. Both top and the bottom part of the belt should be parallel. To adjust the belt position, release screw on the pulley and slightly move with it until you reach the best position. Tighten both screws on the pulley. Using a finger on your left hand, push the belt down. Some force should be needed for bending the belt. But don't try to overstretch the belt as you might damage the printer. You can change the tension in the belt by adjusting the M3X30 screw below the Y-carriage. For following steps, please prepare X-end motor, X-end idler, linear bearings, M3X80 screws, M3NN nylock nut, M3NS nut, 623H bearing with housing. Insert LM8UU linear bearings into the printed parts, as shown in the picture. Make sure the first bearing in each printed part is pushed all the way down. First pair of the bearings should be in line with the top surface on both X-ends. Second pair of bearings should be seated on the rim on both X-ends. Insert the square nut all the way in and then add the screw. For now, we need the screw just to hold in place. Tighten the screw until its head almost reaches the surface of the printed part. We will adjust their final position later. Make sure the M3X80 screw is not visible in the marked hole, as it will block other screw in the future step. If you can see the screw in the hole now, please release it slightly. Insert the M3NN nylock nut in the X-end idler. Insert the 623H bearing in the X-end idler. Secure it in place using M3X80 screw. Place your finger on the bearing and ensure it can rotate freely. If needed, adjust the screw. Take remaining smooth rods and compare their lengths. For X-axis, you need the longest rods and 3 bearings. Now please be careful, gently insert the rod straight into the bearings. Do not apply too much force and do not tilt the rod. Insert the rods with bearings fully into the printed parts. Ensure the correct orientation of the parts and rods. There is a special opening in the top bottom of both X-ends. Check if you pressed the smooth rods all the way in. For following steps, please prepare X-axis motor, GT260 pulley. There is a flat part on the motor shaft rotated upwards. One of the screws must be facing directly against the pad on the shaft. Slightly tighten both screws. Don't press the pulley against the motor. Leave a gap so the pulley can rotate freely. Prepare M3X80 screws. Prepare the motor for X-axis with an assembled pulley. Place the X-axis on the motor as shown in the picture. Insert the M3X80 screws and tighten them. For following steps, please prepare Z-axis bottom left, Z-axis bottom right, and M3 extend screws. Tighten each printed part with M3 extend screws. Don't use excessive strength during tightening. In case of increased resistance, try to place the screw from the other side to clean up the hole. Then return to the front side. For following steps, please prepare Z-axis motor, Z-axis screw covers. Remove the trapezoid nuts from the motors. Don't throw them away, you will need them. Screw the Z-axis cover onto both lead screws. For following steps, please prepare Z motor left, shorter cable, Z motor right, longer cable, M3 extend screws. Secure each motor with 4 M3 extend screws. Tighten evenly and carefully, as you might break the printed parts. For following steps, please prepare trapezoidal nuts, M3X80 screws, and M3N nuts. Turn the X-axis upside down and insert nuts into the traps on the both X ends. Carefully rotate the X-axis onto its backside. Insert the trapezoidal nuts to each X end. Tighten the nuts with M3X80 screws. Aside from the x-axis, please prepare the remaining smooth rods. Carefully slide the x-axis onto the trapezoidal lead screws. By rotating both screws simultaneously, let the x-axis slide until both trapezoidal lead screws are visible. If you feel any significant resistance, try to reseat the axis first. Make sure the top smooth rod of the x-axis and the lower edge of the frame are parallel. Now please be very careful. Gently insert the remaining smooth rods through the bearings on the x-axis, all the way down into the printed parts. Do not apply too much force and do not tilt the rod. For the following steps, please prepare Z-axis top left, Z-axis top right, M3 extend screws. Place the Z-axis top left part on the rods and align it with the frame. Ensure the holes in the printed part are fully aligned with the holes on the frame. Use two M3 extend screws to tighten the Z-axis top left part. Repeat this step on the other side of the frame with Z-axis top right printed part.